Good evening, and welcome to our town hall meeting focused on the reopening of Stafford County Public Schools for the 2021 school year. Before we get started on that this evening, I would like our community to be aware that the school board and school staff have been made aware of some conduct that raises concern in our community. Please know that the school staff and the school board will be discussing the concerns throughout the summer and, of course, in the coming weeks. This evening, though, we are going to focus and answer questions about the reopening of Stafford County Public Schools. To be candid, we are in a new, uncharted territory, not only in our schools, but in every aspect of our lives. Tonight, Dr. Kisner will be presenting a plan designed by staff based on input and ever-changing information. This plan has evolved based on concerns raised and will not meet every need. Many of you know that Stafford County Public Schools has usually a word of the month. The word of the month that we are focused on, I believe, as a school district right now, is the word balance. How to appropriately balance many diverse needs of many diverse families and staff. We will need community input, but also community support as we move forward. Our goal is to offer the best education experience for our students, recognizing that safety and health concerns must be addressed and planned for in the coming months. And with that, I will turn it over to Dr. Kisner.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Hazard. I want to recognize two other people that are here with us tonight. Barry Sutter, who oversees our transportation department, and Colette Hohanka, who oversees our nursing and health department. And I do want to thank everyone for being here tonight. So our structure will be, I'll go over a relatively brief PowerPoint so we could leave as much time as possible to answer questions, and I'll get back to that in a little while. So tonight it's returning to school during the COVID-19 pandemic, and I think that's just a good reminder. Why are we here tonight? Why are we having great conversations? And not lose sight that the reason we're here is because we do have a virus that has, as Ms. Hazard has indicated already, that has really altered the way we live for many, many months. Back in early June, Governor Northam held a press conference, and he went over the opening of school, the model that we'll talk a little bit about tonight. And he reminded us that schools will open up for all students next year, but instruction will look very different. I want the public to know that our actions and decisions and recommendations were not done hastily, have required a lot of thought, input, deliberation, meetings, and we recognize, as I stated in the Friday letter, no one up here, no one, I think, listening wants anything more than to be back to a normal routine where we all would return to school like we did prior to March 11th. But unfortunately, for reasons truly in many ways out of our control, we're unable to do that. So what I want you to know is some of the work that has informed our decisions have been multiple school board meetings. Stafford County Public School had a recovery task force report, which you could find, and everything that I'm going to mention you could find on our website. That task force included teachers, administrators, support staff, parents, and community members. And I will hit some of the highlights of that report. State planning reports and guidance from the Virginia Department of Health and the Rappahannock Area Health Department, which is our local health department. The Center for Disease Control decision tree for opening up schools, the Virginia Department of Education guidance and executive orders, numerous research reports that I, along with our planning team, have reviewed, and professional webinars and discussions. And I will share personally, I have, I was trying to count before this presentation tonight, but since early May, have participated in 18 different professional webinars and discussions with leaders and experts around the country. And then, of course, staff and parent input and collaboration. And I know I'm not hitting 100%, I was, but I respond to emails, I respond to phone calls, and will continue. The volume has definitely increased. As I already indicated, we had parents and others on, community members on our task force. And in the neighborhood that I live, as I walk, I talk and listen, so I'm getting constant feedback. So I want to talk about this importance of remembering, again, why we're here. We're here because of a COVID-19 virus, a pandemic. And I appreciate the comments people have made to me, some suggesting that the COVID-19 is not really what it's been said it's been, that we should go on and just start school, and a lot of these things are guidelines, they're not mandates. And in many ways that's true, that some of the things that we'll talk about are guidelines. But I want to talk about the risk, because it does have 3 levels of risk. The lowest risk, of course, is what many of us have been doing, spending more time at home. Some people might have not even left their homes. So virtual-only classes, activities, and events. More risk is small in-person classes, activities, events. Students stay with the same teacher at least 6 feet apart. Objects are not shared. Include hybrid, virtual, in-person class structured or staggered rotating schedules to facilitating social distance. And the highest risk is full-size in-person class activities, events, no social distancing, shared classroom materials, students move between classes and activities. I want to be forthright and transparent, I always am. It often gets me, I'm not going to say in trouble, but it gets people to wonder. I understand the research, the science, as best a layperson can. I've talked to many people in the health profession, many doctors, many nurses, and others. And I just need to tell you as superintendent, I have no interest in putting people at risk. I have no interest in putting people at risk unnecessarily. And I know it's not just children that I am looking out for. Yes, it is true, and it changes, that the younger children are not as at risk as older adults. Not saying they're not at risk, not as much, but I also have an obligation and responsibility for our 4,000 plus employees. So I mention that is because I cannot support this notion of we just go back to school like school has been. There's nothing more that I would want than do that. But I will share with you that the day, and we unfortunately probably will have people testing positive that will be brought to our attention, and we'll talk about that a little later on how we will address that. And the community will respond and react, and I just want to know that I'm going to take the steps necessary to minimize risk and reduce the transmission as much as possible. So there's 3 phases that the governor has often spoken about. July 1st, in 2 days, Virginia enters phase 3. And that's what we anticipate will be when school starts. I say anticipate because there's no guarantees. As you're already aware, if you've been watching the news or reading the papers, there are certain states that are now on pause, on hold. So I always make a point of identifying the date of these presentations. And today is June 29th, 2020. So the information I'm sharing with you is as of June 29th, 2020. But in phase 3, Instruction will include more in-person instruction for all students. Remote instruction will support in-person instruction. Child care before and after care may be offered in schools. Social distancing will need to be implemented, including buses and buildings. 6-foot separation whenever possible, and large gathering limits in accordance with existing executive orders. So you know that large gathering limit, executive order, is 250 at this point. Continuing on phase 3, to support social distancing, schools may need to stagger student schedules, adopt methods to restrict mixing groups of students, adjust schedules, minimize transition, and consider appropriate recess options. School systems can expand athletic and extracurricular activities with mitigation measures and limit outdoor activities recess to 50 people. As I mentioned, we had a task force which had close to 90 people serving. They identified some priorities, which is driving a good portion of the plans that you have been reacting to. One, development of strategies to get students back in the classroom as much as possible, particularly for our youngest students and other students with special and unique learning needs. And I'll get back to that because I know one of the concerns that I've heard multiple times is the changing of the elementary and high school starting times. Provision of tailored training and professional learning for staff will be imperative to ensure educators are equipped for new ways of facilitating education and supporting social emotional wellness. You may be aware by now, especially if you read my letter, that the school board last week took positive steps in giving our staff additional time to prepare by moving the starting day from August 10th to August 17th. Consideration of safety, budget, and system logistics and all planning. I know I have received a few questions about budget. My comment will simply be that a lot of the changes we have to make do have a cost attached to it. And the school board and board of supervisors have been responsive to the requests, but we also are aware that additional requests most likely will be coming forward, especially if this continues over a longer period of time or we have an increase of COVID-19 cases in Stafford County. Development and maintenance of effective communication with all stakeholders. Tonight is an example. It won't be our last town hall meeting. You are aware that up to early June, you received a weekly letter. I'm committed for the next couple of weeks, every other week, unless something of importance must be shared. And then towards the latter part of July, we'll go back to the weekly communication. Consideration of social emotional wellness needs of students, parents, and staff. This is an issue that I believe all of us have recognized. This closing of school in March has had a huge impact on many people, and we are aware of that. Assurance that the equity lens guides all education models as we return to schools. The beauty of being in public education or in education is that every child is different. Every child has unique needs, unique strengths, and unique areas that we need to focus. So equity is the foundation of many of our decisions. I mentioned earlier about social distancing on a school bus. Honestly, if we just followed the recommendation of the Center for Disease Control and the Virginia Department of Health, we would be looking at a model that has students approximately 6 feet apart, every other row. That would bring us to about 10 students 10 or 11 students on a school bus that traditionally is able to transport about 77 students with a driver. We have looked at different models. We have consulted with our local director of our health department, and we believe there's a safe model that will still have social distancing. I will be recommending to the school board. I have not taken this position to try to win everybody's favor. As I indicated, I have taken this position to do what I believe is the best for children based on the information that I receive and collaborating with others. But I believe with face masks, cloth coverings, understanding there could be some exceptions based on the health needs of children, based on the developmental needs of children, that we would be able to get 20 to 24 students riding on a school bus, which is essential if we want to look at a way of increasing time for children to be at school. And already indicated, even with 20 to 24 students, this is less than a third of normal capacity. Mitigation strategies, health screenings, and temperature checks. We will have more to say about that later and for the next few weeks. For those of you that came to your child's or grandchild's or friend's high school graduation, you participated in a health screening. And I want to thank all of you. I saw children as young as 5 and grandparents as old as 85 wearing cloth coverings because you understood the importance of keeping everyone safe. We will encourage families to make appointments for school visits, limit visitors so you have less chances of outside people bringing the virus to us or spreading it. Cloth face covers, bus driver face shields. For the staff that might be listening, the Department of Labor and Industry, it is their executive order, which is different than guidance, executive order we must follow, will help drive the decision on what we must do as it relates to cloth face covering for our employees. Our school board has invested significant amount of dollars in their 2021 school budget. We are hoping to be able to receive additional dollars from our local board of supervisors. We're hoping that the state will also be providing us additional dollars because we know we're going to have to spend a good amount of time, man and woman power, along with supplies, to make sure our buildings are clean and that we do it on a consistent rotation and schedule. And also, if we do have a situation in which we have to focus on a school or classroom based on COVID-19 positive cases. Plexiglass shields in the front office, hand hygiene and personal care, we will go over that to the point where you will get tired of hearing us say this. You will see signs that are already being put up throughout our school buildings about the importance of good self-care and hygiene. Parents, I speak to you as a parent, older children than maybe yours. If your child is sick, please keep them home. Please keep them home. And we are going to schedule our Virginia Department of Health, our local health department, to do something similar to what we're doing tonight. Responding to cases, and again, we'll go over this in greater detail, but we do have a plan of responding to cases. We will, of course, work very closely, which we have already had. We have had cases in our school system. You might recall, before we closed our schools, we had one of our schools, a staff member testing positive, and at another school, that school community knows, we had a staff member testing positive. So we work very closely with our local health department on how we address that situation. Every school will have a room to help isolate sick children. We will look at clinic traffic control to prevent potential exposures, and we are working with our staff. Our human resource department is creating a protocol, working with our nursing department to return to school work if you test positive for COVID-19. And again, we have procedures, and we will go over that because there's been a few questions on that. So we received, and I'm glad, we received many questions about implementing hybrid learning, and I won't read all of these except to tell you that the hybrid learning that you experienced in the spring, and I do appreciate people's feedback, and I do recognize that we did not have the ability to plan as much as we would have liked, and our staff, in my opinion, overall did a remarkable job under the limited guidance and time to plan. We also had to give out over 6,000 Chromebooks, so we had some students that did not even benefit from what we had to do. But I will just mention real quickly that our plan for hybrid learning, the remote part of the learning, students will be learning new content and standards. There is a comprehensive instructional model that aligns face-to-face and at-home learning for each student. So one of the biggest differences will be that children that will be in school part of the week and also having virtual learning during the other part will have their teachers with them a couple days a week to review, discuss, monitor, and answer. For those who may choose a full virtual learning, again, your children will have an assigned teacher or teachers depending on the grade level. There is a lot more to say. It's 3.5 pages. If I went over it, our 90 minutes would be up. What I will share with you by Friday, we will put on our website an overview of our at-home online learning program that we plan to implement for the upcoming school year, still recognizing that we continue to refine things as we learn different ways of approaching the topic. So let's get into some of the specifics. Commonalities among grade levels. There are two options, and I need to let you know that it is the administration, principals, and central office, along with teachers that they have consulted. And I said in my letter, and I just want to reiterate it, there's not going to be a plan that's going to satisfy everyone. There's not going to be a plan that's going to meet everyone's needs. So I want to put that out there and understand that. But I will share with you, at least right now, that option A, B, and C, and we'll talk C a little bit later, option A and B is where most people have focused. That is the preferred option of at all levels, kindergarten, middle school, and high school. That is the option that's preferred. And I will explain in a few minutes. The key thing is Monday, it would give time for our staff to plan, monitor, and make contact with the students that are participating in remote learning, which truly will be all our students. It will also allow us to have certain students in our buildings, going back to the equity question I raised before, that need additional time and support. Now, there was a question that I will answer right now. Why did you choose Monday? And honestly, in the beginning, we chose Wednesday. But we were asked to look at the calendar And what we discovered was Monday, mainly because of national federal holidays. That is the day that we would have more days where school would be closed because of holidays, that we did not want to take time away from instruction. So that's why it's Monday, not Wednesday. So Group A, just think of it this way, you will be assigned as students or parents, your child will be assigned either Group A or Group B. I'll say it later, but I'll say it now. We are committed to having families intact, staying together. So if you have a third grader, seventh grader, and a ninth grader, they will all be Group A, or they will all be Group B. So on Tuesday and Wednesday, they would be learning at school. Thursday and Friday, they would be remote learning. And again, Group B, Tuesday and Wednesday would be learning at school. And Thursday and Friday, they would be, they would be remote learning. And Thursday and Friday, they would be learning at school. Schedule A, option A, highlights, allows additional time for staff to develop quality remote learning. The criticism that we heard from the first parent survey was loud and clear. Many of you did not have many of your children did not have a positive experience on remote learning. Again, in fairness to the staff at Stafford County Public Schools, I think probably the greatest reason was not giving our staff the time they needed to plan quality instruction. I do want to thank the dozens and dozens of staff members who have been participating in training programs from the spring and now in our partnership with Mary Washington University that we've just extended now for the entire year, where staff, who are now students, are learning best practices for virtual learning. Again, we want to create consistency for students and families. I do want to touch on a question that was asked. Why not half in the morning and half in the afternoon? And simply for two reasons. It would increase greatly the transportation stress that we're already under. It would require us to double our runs. And there is something called contact tracing. If we discover a child or staff member has tested positive for COVID-19, by not having all the children in our building on any day, helps us work with the health department in addressing that issue. I also want to note, not that I'm looking to compare, because I know we are constantly compared to what other school systems are doing. And I appreciate that. I am learning from other school systems. But I will tell you right now, on June 29th, 2020, when you look at other school systems that have already published a proposal, that you will see that our plan, that when I get into more specifics on time, has the most time for face-to-face contact than other schools that I have looked at. Are there others that may have more time? Could be, probably. I just haven't found it yet. Provide specialty programs, a day for specific competency and licensure hour requirements. Again, an example of that would be those who maybe are in the cosmetology that need extra hours. Concerns does not allow as much face-to-face instruction depending on the school, on the schedule used at the secondary level. Students may attend certain courses once a week with a maximum of twice a week. Okay, moving along, we'll move along a little faster so we could get questions. Schedule option B is the model that would have students, Group A, think of it this way, they would be in school Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. And Thursday and Friday, virtual learning. Group B would be in school Thursday, Friday, and Monday with virtual learning on Tuesday and Wednesday. So Monday would be the rotation day. Again, highlights, maximize student time in class to the extent possible under phase 3. Again, creates consistency for students and family. However, which we see as a huge concern, does not allow as much time for staff to develop quality virtual learning experiences. I want to mention option C. I know there's an interest based on parent survey, the second parent survey. Basically, if your child has a health risk, of course, we're going to honor a full 5-day virtual learning option for them. And I'm using the term unique circumstances, but that term unique circumstances might turn into parents that requested for their child. As I indicated in my Friday letter, we hope to get it out by Wednesday or Thursday. We will send a survey to parents that will ask we will ask parents if they want only remote learning for their child. That will help us plan better. And then again, I do want to mention that if the state, for whatever reason, most likely due to health reasons, goes either back to phase 2, which I didn't really talk about, but phase 2 from grades 3 on does not have children in school, or phase 1 does not have children at school at all, then of course our virtual model will be our primary option. Okay, start and end times. So, elementary parents, we heard you loud and clear, we understand. And again, I just want to maybe answer a couple questions now that I know have been asked. Well, why did we learn through your letter or through the PowerPoint that you presented to the school board about the changing of elementary and high school? And again, I'll ask Mr. Sutter later to maybe address this in greater detail. Simply not to surprise people, not to inconvenience people, but going back to the priorities that I already mentioned, and I'll mention again, getting the elementary children in school with least disruption, which would mean that our buses, when they leave the bus garages or the different parking lots throughout the county, that the first run will be our elementary children. For those who are elementary parents, you know the frustration you feel in a regular schedule with no disruptions, the times in which the buses pick up your children later than you would hope or we would hope. And that's often continued on because when high school starts, it has to almost run 100% smoothly. Any backup then causes a disruption for the middle school, and any backup there just compounds the problem for elementary. So we are committed to having 5 hours of instruction for elementary children, and our concern again was that if we had elementary children being the last group of children, and please remember, this is a COVID-19 plan. The school board has not made any decisions beyond COVID-19 of changing the starting times. This was, again, a way to get children in school, and also we did have a concern, still have a concern. If we have children waiting at a bus stop because of a potential backup or delay of our buses, we prefer not having elementary children waiting at the bus stops without supervision. So there are 2 shifts for elementary, and please also recognize that we transport many more elementary children than we transport middle and high school. So student arrival in shift 1, and schools will be designated. It won't be 2 shifts at a school. Your school will either be shift 1 or shift 2, but transportation still has to work out those details. Students would arrive 7:30 to 8 in shift 1. Instruction would be 8 to 1. Dismissal would be 1 to 1:30. In shift 2, students would arrive 8:30 to 9. 9 to 2 would be instruction, and 2 to 2:30 will be dismissal. The detail of the instruction will come from your building principals. Instructional schedules are not driven by school board, not driven by superintendent. It's driven by the building level. So the detail, what we presented last week at the board meeting was defined as a framework, but the specific schedules are driven by the staff at the local building, at the individual building. Middle school, 9:30 to 10, student arrival, 10 to 3 instruction. This is the student schedule, okay? This is not the staff schedule. And dismissal, 3 to 3:30. High school has a little uniqueness to it because we have career technical education programs where we transport children from other schools. We have programs like IB and Governor School where we transport children from other schools. So there's some other pressures that transportation has to address to get our children where they need to be. So you will just notice that their day is 15 minutes longer so we could get the students to those special programs as I just described. So student arrival is 10:30 to 11, instruction is 11 to 4:15, and its dismissal is 4:15 to 4:45. And I need to also point out that our elementary teachers, when we run as the last schedule of the day, again, the backup happens not only in the morning, it happens in the afternoon. You drive around Stafford, you understand what I'm saying. That our elementary teachers and staff have to wait with the children because of their age. Of course, safety is our primary concern. At the high school level, I've been at the bus stops a lot at the end of the day. Not that we want the kids not to be supervised, I am not suggesting that. But the students are in a better position of managing their time than students. So that is another consideration. Again, key considerations, equity, already mentioned, siblings will be on the same schedule, meals. So I will just mention this right now, and the key thing is right now, somebody asked a question, so I'm kind of like giving you little answers as I go along. What will the meal schedule be? And will we adjust as time goes on? And the answer is yes, we will definitely adjust. As more information changes, we will adjust. In many ways, we see this as our schedule for the first few weeks at the end of August, before Labor Day. We will review. We don't see real significant changes. Families need to have a level of consistency. I know you're doing a lot of planning, but there could be tweaks. Meals right now at the elementary and middle school level, in most cases, will be meals that will be brought to the classroom, again, to reduce the transition time, to reduce kids going to social distancing, and also to reduce congregation of children, a lot of kids in one space. High school, we are looking at a model that we actually saw last year in the Rico County Public Schools that will utilize the cafeteria along with most of the building as a place for meals. Right now, how I understand it, there will be a hot and cold meal option available for your children. And yes, if your child gets breakfast, breakfast will be available. And yes, the days that your children are not in school, we will provide meals at the end of your last day, at the last time you're at school that week, that are meals that you could take home and refrigerate, thaw out, and serve. Social emotional needs, as I already indicated. Child care, for the elementary parents that are listening, the YMCA has committed to run before and after school child care. And for the staff that are listening, you'll be getting a survey any day, maybe today, definitely before Wednesday, where we will, again, I am talking ages 5 to 12, but we are looking at child care again for the YMCA. We must have our staff at work. You might be listening, why just the staff? Because it's hard to get a driver. It's hard to have a bus drive if we don't have a driver. It's hard to teach a child if we don't have a teacher. So childcare, we are planning to offer at certain sites, but open up for all staff. And then technology access. We still have areas in Stafford where it's very difficult, if not impossible, to get online. But we are working, our technology department is working to reduce that significantly. Finally, what you could expect this week, you could expect, as I indicated in my Friday letter, parents, 2 surveys. One, we really would like to know if you are planning, now that you have an idea of what the hours look like, there could still be a little tweaking, I imagine not great tweaking. Our transportation routers, dispatchers, and department have been more than amazing in trying to make this work, but we would like to learn if parents are going to be driving or taking a school bus. And we also would like to get a sense of parents that would prefer the remote-only learning. And for our staff, you should be getting some information again this week to see how many of you will need special arrangements due to health reasons, and again, childcare. So I ended with Ms. Hazard already stated, together we will navigate uncharted waters successfully. There will be sacrifice, and I do thank you now, but I think all of us understand the seriousness of what we face. So now to the questions. So 202 questions were submitted. And just to give you an idea of the top categories, instruction by far was the #1 category, 21 questions related to instruction. I will say that there were, which is not surprising, most of the questions had great similarity. So we have a better understanding of what's people's minds. 11 questions related to health, 11 questions related to schedule, 8 questions related to transportation, and 4 related to technology. The rest were 2 and 1. So you know, I have all the questions. And what I did not pick and choose based on the ones I want to answer or the ones that were most kind. I did it by the count. It may be hard to see, but which questions had more people asking. So some of these I might have already answered, but I'm just going to read the question, and sometimes I will turn again to Colette or Barry. Will you provide and what is the child care plan? And again, as I already described, we will have for before and after through the YMCA, and we will have child care for our staff ages 5 to 12. The child care for the YMCA will be similar to last year. I am working, or we are working, with some churches. I have communicated to our Park and Rec Department to see if there's other options available to help with child care supervision. Will you offer extracurriculars such as theater, band, and clubs? My initial reaction is we would like to plan for that. An advantage of high school being towards the latter part of the day is that it gives us some greater flexibility to have these activities after school and getting buses back, which would be really, I don't believe anything's impossible, would be very, very difficult to do if high school was the early start. So theater, band, and clubs, I think, are important, very important for many reasons, socialization of children and getting to a level of normalcy. Will you offer sports, and how will you conduct practices? So the question first on practices, we're following the Virginia High School League's guidelines. Colette is finishing. There are 2 things that I need to submit as superintendent. I need to submit a health plan and an education plan. The health plan has to be submitted when we are having students back on our property. So we're almost there in completing the health plan, and the health plan does include how we are handling practices. The VSHL, as you may or may not be aware, the Virginia High School League, has not made a decision yet for fall sports. Their executive board met last week, and they decided to delay a decision for a future meeting, which I believe will happen in the next couple of weeks. So right now, there is not a high school in Virginia that is planning competitive sports, because that has not been approved. Okay, the next question I'm going to turn to Colette. What will you do if a student or teacher tests positive for COVID?
So if we have a student or teacher that tests positive for COVID-19, the health department will become involved with the case because they are the lead in giving us guidance on how to care for students and staff. There is a confidentiality piece as far as who the person is. We don't identify them, but we would identify to the families whoever was in close contact with that person. Anybody that's been less than 6 feet distance for more than 15 minutes is considered a close contact. So we'll identify what the symptoms are of that student, bring them to an area that we've previously identified to remove them from healthy children so that we don't share already what's going on, placing a mask on them and then calling the family, conferring with the health department to discuss the symptoms they're presenting with, and also having a letter prepared that this health department will approve for us to use to send to the families of the people that have been contacted. We're going to be monitoring the child's schedule, the buses that they've been on, what specialists have been in contact with them, the classrooms that they've been in order to make sure that anybody that's been exposed is properly identified and is informed of what they need to do to self-quarantine per guidance from the health department.
Thank you. I'm going to ask you another question, Kay. Well, well, this question is for you, then I'll answer the next one. Will you conduct interval temperature checks daily?
We don't do interval temperature checks on a scheduled basis for students. It would be a major disruption to the educational process. If students are having symptoms, they're going to get identified by the teacher to the school nurse, and the nurse will then evaluate the student. And part of a general assessment for any child that's presenting with any kind of symptoms is to do a temperature check at that time.
Okay, thank you. A question that is asked, are masks required for students and staff? So I will just answer parts that I'm aware of right now. The question as relates to students, the school board will still deliberate on that question. As I already stated, in order to increase the number of children on a school bus so we could extend the length of an instructional day, I will be recommending to the board that we have masks required for students on the school bus, recognizing that there will be a few students for reasons that are specific to their needs, medical, other reasons, that may not be appropriate. The staff, there are, again, as I indicated, executive orders that speak to employees, and it doesn't discriminate if you work in a restaurant, a bank, or a school setting. There is there's executive orders. So again, executive orders are you have to follow it, okay? We also know best practices, what's highly recommended, that staff, if they're in a situation where they're going to have an extended period of time of being less than 6 feet away. Remember, the mask is a message, and again, I've been reminded to say cloth coverings and not masks, so I want to be consistent on the language. The question said masks, that's why I'm going to, but the cloth coverings is really, in my judgment, a message to the school community that I want to protect you. That's what you're really doing. And as I already indicated, yes, children, as I understand it, I am not a medical doctor, I'm not an expert, are, yes, at lower risk, not at no risk, but our adults are at higher risk. So, and the other part of that question, or a question, who's going to supply it? So this is my answer, is that cloth masks need to become part of your daily attire. And they need to be cleaned. And they need to be owned by the families. I have at least a half a dozen cloth masks, cloth coverings. A few weeks ago, maybe a month ago, I never imagined that I would have one. Now, will we have at school, if someone needs one and they forgot it? Of course we will. We're not going to send you home for not having a covering. But we are going to ask parents, like we already do every year for supplies, that this is something that you would take responsibility for, because they also need to be cleaned. And we're actually going to be sending some information out that comes from CDC and others on how to maintain your covering. How will you sanitize classroom and common areas? And we are, again, the school board put additional dollars in. We have a contract with a private company that we use. We have the materials and resources and disinfectants that we need. We'll be doing multiple cleanings after every class. We will be doing disinfecting. We will be disinfecting large areas. We'll be disinfecting our buses. That's another thing I want to mention. Why we need the gap in between the bus schedules, because after each run, we are going to wipe down the seats and disinfect the areas that people touch. I do want to thank the Board of Supervisors, the school board. We're in a position when your students return that every child could have their own Chromebook. It's important for multiple reasons, but one of the main reasons is to limit sharing. We cannot share materials, we cannot share art and music materials, and Chromebooks is an area. So there's many hours and a lot of planning in keeping our schools safe. You're going to see, and part of the week of August 10th is we're going to invite parents through a schedule to visit your child's classroom, walk your child's hallways, so you could see the steps we are taking, and you'll see a lot of increased hand sanitize stations, okay, throughout the schools. What will you do if someone does not wear a mask? And we will do what we do anytime we have a request and the request is not followed. We will have a conversation with the student, we will have a conversation with the family, and hopefully we could come to an agreement that a better understanding of the request and come to an agreement of following what we're asked. What is the plan for CTE, Critical Education, Governor's School IB Focus Program? And there's a second part to that question. Will students lose their spot if they are 100% virtual? The answer is no one's going to lose their spot. Let me make sure I make that point. But your instruction may be altered. There are some CTE classes that are much more challenging to do virtually than do face-to-face. There might be an opportunity. We are working closely with the Governor's School and IB where we can offer virtual instruction, and I think that would hold true also for Focus. So no one would lose their spot, but the one that I think most about as maybe more of a challenge will be the critical education courses. And, okay, this is a question that a lot of people asked, and again, I just want to give the same answer. Is there a 100% virtual plan? And you will see, again, before this week's over, the framework of the 100% virtual plan with the recommendations of the times of instruction. It will not be, I want to make sure we understand this. Our teachers will be teaching 4 days a week. They will be planning, and they will have other children in their classes, some children, on that 5th day. So I don't want to give you the impression that the virtual learning will be a live teacher in front of you just replicating what takes place in a classroom. That's not part of our remote learning plan. That's really not part of most school systems' remote learning plans. If we only had a remote learning option, if for some reason our schools had to go back to phase 1, then I could see that potential where it would be more real-time, face-to-face with a teacher. Again, when you see the document that will be on our website before the week's over, I believe you'll have greater understanding. Will staff have adequate time to plan? I think any teacher will tell you there's never enough time to plan. Why we are moving to schedule, why our preferred schedule, Schedule A, is to increase the time for planning. What is the plan for teacher shortage? How will you cover classes? Again, we hope there's not going to be a teacher shortage, but if there is a teacher shortage, which we have had in every year since I've been here, especially in certain subject areas, we will take the steps of either having teachers off our substitute list, looking at consolidating some classes, but we will cover the classes. Looking for, okay, how will you serve meals? Okay, I think I indicated that. Will you change, 5 people asked, will you change the plan mid-year if restrictions are lifted? When will you reevaluate? So again, we're going to, I mean, honestly, I probably reevaluate every hour, but every week I have 3 meetings with our instructional leadership team and our cabinet, which includes people from transportation, health services, food services, technology, HR, and so on. If the restrictions are lifted, will we change the plan? I think there would be, my initial thinking, and I'm saying don't quote me, but I'm talking to hundreds of people. My initial thinking is that if we made any changes, as people might have been frustrated with some of these changes happening fast, we would give plenty of time to transition to another plan. And so no one is waking up one morning to find out that your child's schedule has changed drastically. Okay, why did it change? We had 10 people ask the same question in a different way. Why did it change the elementary and high school start time? Again, I just want to, and I do appreciate that, it's probably the most drastic change, although, not that I'm here to compare, I do want to say there were, again, many emails supporting the change, but that's not, this question is not written to say I support the plan, it's asking why, and again, it was to make sure we get the elementary children in school with least disruption, and also limit the chances that they'll be at bus stops by themselves. Okay, how will you decide which students are on a Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday, Friday schedule? So that's a great question. They're all great questions, but that's a question I want to make sure I explain a little bit. So the 6 feet social distancing, or when possible, is the guideline. And our planning department, working with our building principals, are creating designs for our different classrooms. Our classrooms are not standardized. We have 33 buildings when you include preschool. And I know I did not speak a lot about, I haven't spoken about the early childhood. We will post that schedule before the week's over. And I apologize if you have a child in one of our early childhood programs. You are not being forgotten. Pretty much everything that I've spoken to about K-12 does apply to early childhood. But anyway, So we have kind of landed on a formula. We've looked at different formulas through different discussions with different professional groups, different architect firms, our person that oversees our building and ground department is a licensed architect. We are basically landing on this notion of 50%, that if your child's in a classroom of 24 children, you will see somewhere of 12. Could it be 13 and 14? It could be. Could it be 10? It could be, but we're starting with the notion of 12. If they're in a classroom of 28, 14. If they're in a class of 20, 10. And going back to what I said earlier, which is very important to you as parents, is I got a lot of emails on this about, please, whatever you do, I'm okay with what you're trying to do, I'm not okay with what you're trying to do, but there's something that I really need you to do, is keep my family together. And I say it, and my staff will tell you, I have not wavered on that. Your families, your children will be intact. So to answer your question, we're looking at trying to keep our classes as close as 50% as possible, protecting social distancing, 6 feet when possible. If it's not 6 feet, I don't want you to get the impression it'll be 2, 3, or 4 feet. I'm saying it might be 5 feet, 9 inches, it might be 5 feet, 8 inches, it might be 6 feet, 3 inches, but it's not gonna be 2 feet, 3 feet. And we're looking at keeping families intact. The building principals are going to have to coordinate with with other departments, so the elementary, middle, and high school, and we're doing it by alphabet. I mean, it doesn't work out as smoothly to tell you that 50% of our children are A to H-I-J-K, or A to K, and other 50% are L to Z. That would be so great. I can give you the answer right now. It doesn't work that simply. If it did, I will go out and buy the lottery. So we're looking at those two factors, trying to keep as close as possible to 50%, keeping families intact, and honoring the capacity loads of the buses. How will my special needs 504 IOP, children with different disability categories, how will that be handled? And again, it will be handled through the process that is in place now. You as a parent have different procedures, different due process procedures, the individualized education plan, and your special ed contacts at your building and at the central office level will be reaching out. As I already stated, there are certain groups of children that we believe will be in school more than the 2 days that I shared with you based on their unique learning needs. The national research, the state research, the observations made locally is that there are some children, again, based on their unique individual learning needs, the remote learning is just not effective. We have children in our school system that have many adults that provide them support, specialized services, and it's remarkably difficult, if nearly impossible, to do that in a remote learning system. I'm going to just stop here. Oh, what time is 5 to 7? Okay, good. I'm going to stop here to turn it over to Mr. Sutter, to see, before I get into a few more questions, because I get into the transportation section now. If you want to talk a little bit about how the routing will be, if you want to again touch upon elementary, early, and whatever you want to touch upon.
Okay, if I could, Dr. Kisner, and this is something I meant to mention earlier, so you would have an idea of it. I've been approached by drivers who see face shield and think about the condensation, the buildup, and that type of thing. And I just want to address here for any of the drivers who may be watching this that according to the Department of Education is where we got that, the Virginia Department of Education is where we got that guidance, that the face shield can come off and should come off when you're actually driving the bus. So, and I'm sure there'll be other concerns, but with the elementary going first, and to go back to what you said, it is to get our most vulnerable population in the school to start. And it will be, I'm not gonna gloss over, it's gonna be a challenge. It's gonna be a challenge, thus we have the staggered, the A schedule and the B schedule, or the first shift and second shift, however we called it. Because, as always, I have a concern to make sure that there is a driver in every seat of the bus, so it will be a challenge on that. But I think ultimately it's going to play out in the best interest of our elementary students and their families.
Could you talk a little bit about how the buses start their day? Like, do they start in the middle of the Stafford and work its way out, or they start in the out and come on in?
Well, we base our parking locations. We have 5 or 6 parking locations around the county, if not more. We base the base the routing on where the buses are actually parked. We do our best to keep what's called deadhead miles down, which deadhead miles are when you're not transporting students. And our coordinators work very hard to make sure that those buses are parked close to where they start. Of course, it could work the opposite way. In the afternoon, they could end up further away from that parking location, but when we start in the morning, that's what we aim for.
Okay. Now I'm going to ask specific questions about transportation. There is one that's a transportation, but I also think has a health component to it. If a child tests positive, will the corresponding bus be taken out of rotation?
I will tell you how I would handle that. My first phone call, yes, the bus would be taken out of rotation at that point, absolutely. But then I would call Colette Hokana, and she has been my guiding star here the past few weeks, so I would stay in touch with her.
And Colette, maybe you could talk about that in a general term. If a child in a classroom or school, what's the guidance we're hearing from the health department as it relates to how we react to a positive test?
So if a child becomes sick during the day and we suspect it's COVID-19, we're going to close that classroom down.
You have your thing on, green button, yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't have the mic on. So if a child becomes ill at school and we suspect that it's COVID-19 and we've confirmed with the health department that they do need to go and get tested, we're going to close that classroom down. We're going to identify all the children in the room, give them that letter from the health department that gives them guidance on self-quarantining, close that classroom down and get it disinfected. There's a electrostatic disinfection device that we have in the county that does that rather rapidly. The recommendation is to close the room for 24 hours before you go in to clean it, so that the cleaning services people, the droplets get a chance to settle and they don't have to put on like a basic hazmat suit, which we don't have. So it's to allow the droplets to settle and then go in and do that disinfection and cleaning.
Okay.
And
The bus would be treated the same way, right, Barry?
yes, Dr. Kisner, if I may, we have those electrostatic, well, we had one at the garage, it broke last week. We have 2 more on the way. We had a bad flu outbreak 3 years ago, and we've been using an electrostatic machine anytime a bus comes into the shop, so we're prepared there.
Okay, good. Because you mentioned the flu, I just want to remind parents, please make sure a child gets the flu shot. We're facing different illnesses that have some like symptoms. So, again, talk to your health provider, but.
Dr. Kisner, if I may,
Yeah.
the recommendation from the CDC, from the Virginia Department of Health and the American Academy of Pediatrics is to contact your healthcare providers if your children are due for immunizations and well child checkups, to start scheduling them. The Code of Virginia was not waived as far as the requirement for enrollment concerning immunizations and physicals. So please make those appointments to get those documents taken care of. If you're having difficulty getting an appointment, just contact the school nurse near the time school starts, and we'll tell you how we can handle that situation then.
So there's a transportation question, Barry, that I think I can answer. If my child drives to school, if I drive my child to school, will they be able to ride the bus on days I cannot drive? And there's another question along those lines. If I drive my child one way to school can they take a bus the opposite direction? And in our survey, well, let me just answer the first part. If you drive your child to school and you're not able to pick them up or her up, we'll get your kid home, okay? We would just ask you to let us know early as possible that you will not be able to pick up your child. So again, staying with the 24 maximum on a bus, we can make the accommodations. To the second question along those lines, in the survey that you will be receiving this week, we will ask you that question. Are you planning to, something like this, are you planning to drive your child to school but not home from school, and vice versa? Because again, this is to give our people that are going to do the routes the opportunity to plan. So to answer your question, yes, we will accommodate, but you have to help communicate this so we could make it as smooth as possible. Another transportation question that, again, is a great question. It's probably less for Barry. So we anticipate we'll know more at the end. The survey that will come out this week will give people, we know it's 4th of July weekend, we'll give people time to complete it. It's going to be just a few questions with a quick fill in the box. But anyway, have you coordinated a traffic impact plan with more parents dropping off students? And that's a great question, because even today, or if we didn't have COVID-19, in some of our schools, that's a huge challenge. And so the answer to your question is, our staff are working and looking at it. Once we have the numbers more, we will, I know there's a lot of days of the month. I'll make up my days of the month, but patience will be one of them, and understanding. So if you have children at any school, you appreciate the drop-off situation and pickup situation. So it's definitely on our radar. And we're also concerned about kids congregating. We're looking at different entryway into the building. We don't want everybody into the building. We don't want everybody into the office. So again, we will go over all this with you, and as already mentioned, you will be invited by your building principals to visit the schools. There'll be a lot of orientation programs. I do want to say, I'm jumping around, but I forgot to mention this. On the virtual remote learning, we will have orientation programs for the staff, for the parents also. We're going to have more helplines, help desks available. So it's not, again, be like it was in the spring. There will be virtual parent meetings so you could understand the virtual learning. And again, we understand, school board members and myself could tell you there's been meetings that we've had where somebody's technology did not work as effectively as they thought it would before the meeting started. So the feedback that we got from the surveys definitely let us know that that's a concern. And so, so we are looking at traffic impact. Barry, I'm not sure if you'll be able to answer this, or maybe you don't want to, no, but with what, and you probably don't have enough time to, you may not know it, but if you know it, answer it. What is the earliest time for an elementary bus stop in the morning?
I was talking to one of the coordinators this afternoon, in fact, right before this meeting, and it looks like it'll be 6:15, 6:20.
Even with adjusted times?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And that's in the far reaches going out towards King George or Fauquier, out in that area.
All right. So there's a question that was asked that, and my answer is going to be, I don't know at this point, but let me ask the question. Can family A go on a family B schedule if they share ride? And my initial reaction is, I would like to make that work, because sharing a ride although there might be some questions with social distancing in the car, I see my nurse saying, wait, why do you want that to happen? But I'm split. Then I see transportation say, yeah, share the ride. So as I started off by saying, I don't know the exact answer, but I see benefit, but there's also some risk to it. Okay, let me just split the difference on that. Okay, then there's a lot of questions that are really questions that will come from the buildings. For example, will students be able to when will students be able to purchase parking passes? I don't even know when they purchase them now, but that will be something that comes from the building. Oh, this is a question for you, Barry. How many additional bus routes are planned?
About 100 extra runs, both morning and afternoon.
Okay. Trying to. Yeah, a question, yes, the question is, are students, will attendance be taken for remote learning? The answer is yes. Grades will be required for remote learning. That's a difference than the spring. And let me just see if there's any. How will you adjust advanced courses, exams, testing for online-only study? Again, that will come from the buildings, but that conversation I know is already taking place. We will have to obviously adjust for online study only, exams versus face-to-face. There is a question that I just touch upon real quickly. Actually, two people asked this question. Where are you finding the extra $4.7 million required to support this plan? And let me just make the comment. The school board last week at the meeting, they asked us what extra costs are associated with the with the COVID-19 plan. And our finance department, working with our buildings and central office departments, and again, everything I'm sharing with you is on our website. The number is $4.75 million. And so where we're finding the extra $4.75 million is in conversations with the Board of Supervisors, hoping that there will be some additional dollars coming from the state, hoping that there will be additional dollars coming from the federal government under what we call the CARES Act. Our plan does not get stopped if we don't get the $4.57 million, but it definitely has impact. You might have saw in the newspaper that Prince William County, they came up with about $44 million that they needed to support their plan, extra, and they're about 3 times the size of Stafford County Schools. So I'm hoping that we'll be successful with the $4.75 million. I will also say this is not really driving the decision, but because we're on budget, Schedule A, the one that's being recommended, according to my finance department and working with transportation, is about $1.75 million less than Schedule B. And so, as we know, there's going to be a lot of different needs, extra needs. The ability to reduce our costs by $1.75 million does have an attractive element to it. I'm going to stop here because I think I really touched on, there's a lot of single questions that are, again, questions that will be more at the building level. One question maybe I could answer. Will you allow waivers for students to return 100% of the time? And my honest answer is I would not be supportive of that. Again, based on everything that I already mentioned, will there possibly be some children that are in school 100% of the time? Could be, as based on what I already mentioned, children with unique learning needs. But to offer a waiver, and I think what this question is alluding to, parents sign a waiver saying, if my kid gets sick, we're not going to hold the school harmless. Again, it's not as simple as that, but I did want to at least answer that question. Ms. Hazard, is there any closing comments that you would like to make?
Sure. I guess my overall comment, again, is this is a massive undertaking. And in order for us to make the best decisions for your family, for your students, for our staff, is we are going to need accurate information. The ability to run and maybe need extra bus runs is going to be very dependent upon how many of you are driving your children. That kind of data is going to be very helpful to us to craft, whether this is exactly the right plan or not. But right now, without those kinds of pieces of data, we have to plan in the aggregate. But what we have learned, and we have learned this in some of our more difficult decision-making that we've had to make in our decisions about moving students around, and I hate using the redistricting word, is that we have good, big data. But the way that we're going to make the best decisions is if we know individual data. So when these surveys come, when there are requests for information, please provide that information. There may be ways to look at things regionally. I am not, please know, Mr. Sudduth, I am not volunteering to be part of your staff. But if we see that certain areas or regions have higher we can make some good adjustments, but all of that is needed for data. So again, the school board is still seeking, obviously, input, and we are evolving. Please let us know, give us more ideas. However, I will say, we also do have to look at how long do we wait to make a decision. All of these decisions, 30,000 kids, 4,000 employees, we need to start making that. So again, please reply to these surveys. I don't know if Dr. Kisner and I have talked about how those surveys will be going out. I don't know how spam, another area I'm not supposed to be in is technology, but we want to make sure that we send out, please be looking at from your school, your individual school, as well as Stafford County Public Schools, because again, information is going to help us be able to make better decisions based on the unique needs of Stafford County. Yes, there are lots of plans going on that there are going to be commonalities across the Commonwealth because of our mandates, guidelines, things that we are operating within. However, the best way we can make the best plan for Stafford County is to know not only what Stafford County wants to have, but really what is feasible and how much our community is going to step up to help us in this really unprecedented time.
Thank you. I just maybe just say a couple quick things. I think it would help Barry, and I know you need more time on this, but those bus pickups that are going to be very early, if we could get that communication, because that might help parents make a decision if they want to drive their child to school, okay? I know I asked you the earliest, which maybe wasn't a fair question because I know the majority of the children will not be at that time. But I do for those that live on the, I think you said on the King George line, that may help them.
And Fauquier, I'll say it.
Yeah, we're a very large county. There is a question that I just, 5 people asked. Will we have recess? The answer is yes. Children need to go out, they need to be active, they need to socialize. Will we have some social distancing? Yes. If a kid breaks the space, will they get in trouble? No. If we have equipment like playground equipment, will we disinfect often? Absolutely. But we want, when kids are in school, they're going to have art, they're going to have music, they're going to have PE. they're gonna have foreign language, you know, they're gonna have. Singing, you know, it transmits by droplets in the air. So will some of our teachers be adjusting their curriculum? Yes. I do want to go to Ms. Hazard's point. There is another requirement. So our school system, and I'm proud of what we did. We put out a plan earlier than some of the other school systems. We also open up somewhat earlier than some of our neighbors to the north, because we wanted people to react. I know some people are saying you only gave us a month notice for the elementary switch, but truthfully, if you look at the calendar, we gave you almost 2 months' notice, but here nor there, the point being, you felt like you didn't get enough notice, and I respect that. But I also want you to know it's required that every school system, that the superintendent submits a educational plan to the Department of Ed 15 business days prior to the opening of school. And 15 business days is approximately 21 calendar days based on factoring in weekends. So, so I just wanted to remind you that there is a sense that we have to plan, and the point of letting us know on transportation and remote learning just gives us a better opportunity to plan. And I am not suggesting that you are locked into that for the rest of the year. It just helps us for planning purposes. I again thank parents. You are not shy in sharing your thoughts, and I would tell you to keep that going. I just hope you could appreciate the complexity of trying to make sure we keep our staff and, of course, our children, and you as parents, and some of your children may live with grandparents, safe, and, of course, keeping the socialization, instruction, and emotional well-being of our school community together. So this is our first. I told you a couple weeks ago that we would schedule some town hall meetings. We will schedule one for teachers in the very near future. We are scheduling one for our bus drivers in the very near future. And we will, again, schedule one, even though this, of course, is open to everyone, most of our answers were directed towards parents. So I thank you, and I wish everyone a great week. Happy 4th of July, and please look out for those surveys that will be coming before the week is over. Thank you very much.